I had an embarrassingly fun time with Deadpool and Wolverine. As in, I was the most loud, obnoxious person in that theater. I laughed, I clapped, I fist pumped, I squeed, and right from the get-go, because if there is nothing else to say about this movie, it has the greatest opening credits of all time, and Deadpool 2 had a pretty good one too. I adored Jackman and Reynolds together, I adored the fight scenes, which you know means something because I get action fatigue pretty easily. I loved the soundtrack. Boy, that was a targeted track list of early 2000s millennial nostalgia. And something I haven't heard anybody compliment about, the villain, Cassandra, is amazing. If that counts as an MCU villain, that might be in my top 3. I just had an absolute blast, and quite likely so did a number of people, as completely unsurprisingly, Deadpool and Wolverine has now broken the box office opening weekend record for this year, and likely for rated R movies in general. But this movie has also come with a certain amount of speculation, or slightly less enthusiastic reception, given how much this movie's hype is reliant on its gimmicks. Between, at this point, Deadpool's predictable comedic patterns of interrupting every character with either a crass comment, a fourth wall break, or a semi-obscure nostalgic reference, or some combination of the three, but especially those surprise cameos. Whereas a notable thing about Deadpool's other movies is that they had surprisingly effective emotional storylines, which there definitely is one in Deadpool vs. Wolverine, it just doesn't quite hit as hard. I actually rewatched the other 2 Deadpools after I saw Wolverine, and I can assess that they have better structured narratives, but I also wasn't really in the mood for that. I wanted the petty back and forth and the dumb jokes. That was just what I was in the mood for at the moment, though of course that wouldn't necessarily always be the case. Now, it's true that my loudest reactions came from the surprise cameos, that they were pretty good about keeping hush until the film's inevitable release, and then people could just look them up on IMDb, or given away in freaking YouTube thumbnails, you sociopaths, because it is often noted that this is just part of the current trends, that almost everything about Deadpool has been exploited to death in so many other modern works, from the meta humor to the fourth wall breaks to Easter egg factories. Yeah, we definitely have gotten our fill of those. Couldn't even escape it in my Despicable Me video, where some people had to insist that the ending song with the return of all of the old villains for 5 whole seconds while they really terribly sang an underwhelming song somehow made that film worth it. But particularly the nature of these cameos are only going to be as hard-hitting as they are for people who know who these people are. Like, as much as I would say that this movie absolutely gave me levels of hype that I haven't felt since Endgame, well, Spider-Verse obviously, but very particularly in Endgame was that similar feeling that after my viewing of Endgame, I instantly wanted to go to another movie theater just because I wanted to sit with another theater during that portal scene. Deadpool and Wolverine gave me the same feeling, that I just wanted to be in another theater of audiences to experience these reveals in real time, because it was electric. But obviously, 10 years from now, that portal scene, except for the part where you're not experiencing it in a theater, though of course they're gonna re-release it, but that portal scene will still hit the same for anyone who just watches the MCU movies in order, even if they skip a couple of them, as long as they watch Infinity War. In Deadpool, these moments are only going to hit knowing that this movie came right after Disney acquired Fox, and will be the most effective for people of a certain generation who lived through and paid attention to the ups and downs of the rise of the superhero movies pre-MCU. Yeah, some of these moments are just gonna be kind of awkward in the 2030s. Now, this may seem a little random, but a point that is tangentially connected that I have just been wanting to say at some point is that the entire conversation around movie theaters struggling and trying to get people back into movie theaters, like, first of all, we know that the main reason that movie theaters are struggling is the studio's own fault, for various reasons. And the success of Deadpool vs. Wolverine does not mean in any way that movie theaters are saved, or that Wolverine saved the MCU. It's one movie. Both of those things need to be able to survive past this one movie. And the MCU isn't gonna have the gratuitous blood-filled violence or the has-been hotel level of F-bombs to rely on. Though obviously Disney and others have already made attempts at more family-friendly versions of Deadpool, some of which even to decent success. In fact, California Adventure right now has a Deadpool and Wolverine story time that they're doing that is actually pretty funny. But obviously the movies are something special. But I also don't think people recognize that at least part of the issue with attendance isn't just that movies have gotten stupidly expensive, they've also become very expensive in time. And I don't mean that I don't love long movies. It's one thing for a movie itself to be long, but when you add teasers and you add the commute to said movie theater, that's like half of a day. Like, honestly, that's the main reason I don't go to movie theaters as often as I want to. We're in a current economy that expects you to constantly be on the grind. People just don't have time for this, which is why people watch everything at home where you can pause or do things during, and especially when those movies are just going to be sent to streaming in 2 months, why bother? And while I am sympathetic to the plight of the movie theaters and appreciate them, in the same breath I'm also sort of resentful of the mentality of the pro-theater hype people who insist that it's just not worth it if you don't see it in theaters. Like the whole thing when the Dune director said that because of the special effects, that watching Dune on a small screen was the equivalent of putting a speedboat in a bathtub, that just made me go, oh well, I missed seeing it in theaters, I guess I won't watch it then. Like, it just bothers me that studios seem to just not process that a movie's time spent in theater is such a tiny percentage of the time it's going to exist on this planet. Hopefully. Movies are not in theaters forever, guys, and even when they are, only a fraction of them have all of the technical specs that you want of them, Nolan, that movie will be watched by infinitely more people through the generations in the future than it will be by people who saw it in theaters. But I know that tiny percentage is the studio's main money-making opportunity for that particular quarter. But that's supposed to be what separates us dirty, disposable content creators from actual prestige storytelling. Long walk to get to the already stated point that these reveals are only going to be as effective as they are to certain people at this very point in time, and not be as effective in the future as maybe the other Deadpools because of the story, or as receptive to future audiences who may not know about the films that this is calling back to. But that also doesn't mean that there isn't value in the enjoyment experienced right now to this particular demographic. In fact, in contrary to literally everything I just said, its value is in the fact that its peak effect is fleeting, which is one of the arguments for movie theaters that I do finally appreciate, even if there's very little they can do with the expense of it all. It's very much like a concert in that way, and granted, I have never really been a concert person, paying a stupid amount of money to barely hear a song that you already know, but when it's for something or someone that is so invested in it, it does feel special, I'm told. And these callbacks in a mocking celebration of the superheroes that the studio just recently required and are basically going to give one last hurrah to before they completely replaced them, could have been so much worse. It could have been a straight up defecating on the corpse after mutilating the body situation, but it really does try to come off as genuine appreciation for these movies without harping too much on how significantly flawed they are, while also shading the MCU at the same time. Though, I can understand how that still feels a little grandiose. I mean, there's this very strong attitude that, of course, Ryan Reynolds of all people would be sympathetic, looking back at Fox and going, ha, we did it correctly. Was this so hard? As they basically say when Wolverine finally wears the yellow jumpsuit. My point is, I had a fun time, and I'm just not concerning myself in the moment about whether or not Deadpool vs. Wolverine is a good movie that will stand the test of time. I had fun on this weekend in a way that I never will again. And naturally, there is an art, of course, to doing the gimmicks well, because the cameos aren't just indulgent, they are thematic and relevant to the story. They are the ones, like Deadpool and Wolverine, that were discarded, unappreciated. You know, in the story, not metatextually. But then also, the twist cameo? That is never going to happen again. And I said, the soundtrack was very obviously deliberately nostalgically targeted to the demographic they knew would be the most invested in this. But of course, at the same time, operates on the same ironic soundtrack gimmick that was so effective in Guardians and feebly imitated by Suicide Squad. Obviously, Guardians still wins because they had way more of a grounded reason for picking the songs that they did. Still, there is a general fun and playfulness to those needle drops, whereas when it happens in something like Illumination, it literally just feels like they're too cheap to hire a composer. Though, of course, I would still advocate, as most people will, that it is a good to great film due to its excellent filmmaking and good performances and good banter and excellent fights. Yes, it would help if the story was more solid, if there was less extraneous exposition to catch up everybody that doesn't know what the TVA is from Loki, if there was less MCU at its worst style jokes where something is just awkward and we sit on it forever for some reason. Seriously, whenever Peter showed up, I was just like, wow, that killed my buzz. I could actually feel myself drying up on the spot. And if I went back over it again, it might indeed be what I have referred to in the past as a YouTube clip movie, where just the individual scenes are as effective by themselves almost more than they are in story context. Why bother sitting through the whole thing again? Hell, if I really wanted to put on my superior buzz-killing script analytical hat on, I would probably get into whether Deadpool and Wolverine really were a good team-up, and not whether Wolverine was just one of the various serious characters that Deadpool interrupted every single 5 seconds. He was just the one who happened to stay on screen the longest. Not that it isn't good to see Hugh, it always is. Best Oscar opener of all time, like, it's not even close.
How come comic book movies never get nominated? How can $1 billion be unsophisticated?
And certainly no slight to the actors' chemistry, which was certainly radiating, though can we be sure that that was Ryan Reynolds in that suit every time? Since we know he wasn't dancing in the opening credits, I feel so betrayed! But sure, Ryan had stunt doubles, go figure. It was probably him during all the dialogue scenes, but we don't know. And as much as I love a good buddy road trip movie, there was never a really solid transition point where that animosity went from anger to friendship. For as many of these lines could have been laid on top of another persistent flirt versus old school Grump who's sick of his shit, there was no pivotal Husker Du moment of realizing or connection that they're both going through similar shit, they see each other in a new light, and seeing how that they can make each other's lives more bearable going forward, or even a Buzz Woody moment. Deadpool always had the hots for Wolverine since movie 1, where he merely endured him while he went through his own shit. But of course, you're sure to form a sort of trauma bond when you've gone through this level of insanity and near death. And hey, we'll always have that time we fooled around in the car. Point is, sure, I could point out the potential flaws, but they honestly pale in comparison to the fun that I had. Sometimes there are gimmicks that just work, especially when they're accompanied by genuine filmmaking prowess. And if Venture Bros has proven anything, it doesn't matter if the plot is confusing as long as the performances and the banter is fun. And seriously, it did pretty much peak with the opening credit sequence. And of course, even though movies often have substantially dated material, they definitely don't hit the same as they did at the time, but they're often fascinating as time capsules that can provide a lot of insight to future generations about the movies made at this time in terms of what was valuable and what was being made and what they're referencing, inspiring them to find the historical context. There's obviously more than one way to appreciate a movie, and later generations may find things to appreciate that this generation didn't. Just like there is more than one way to perceive the world and more than one way to use your brain. Which is why I'm proud and thankful for this video's sponsor, Brilliant. Brilliant is engaging interactive learning in multiple STEM fields like math, logic, scientific reasoning, programming to data analysis, and a lot more. For each of its lessons, Brilliant uses appealing graphics and animations and even game mechanics to make the lessons compelling and enjoyable. But what I particularly love about it, and sometimes what makes these subjects so difficult in traditional education, is providing real-world context and parallels and even case studies. To me, being able to really apply the knowledge is just as important as making it fun. And being able to get a glimpse of each of these subjects, even at the introductory level, already helps and makes so many bizarre and confusing aspects of life make a lot more sense, which helps when you explore subjects that increase your various ways of thinking. Like, even if I don't want to be a coder, it is certainly helpful as someone who uses computers to see the starting points of how computers think and operate. And it really is for everyone, whether you're someone who's starting from the beginning, whether you're someone who just enjoys a good brain teaser now and again to keep your mind sharp, or if you genuinely want to dip your toe into a new potential field of employment, but can only handle 15 minutes of learning a day. This site is incredibly user-friendly, meets you at your level, and picks up right where you left off each time. There really is just so much you can get out of Brilliant, and you can try it for free for 30 days by going to brilliant.org/sellspecs or by clicking the link in the description, where you will also get 20% off an annual subscription. Thanks again to Brilliant for sponsoring, and I hope that you all have fun learning. You're a loser, baby, a loser, but just maybe if we eat shit together, things will end up differently. It's time to lose your self-loathing, excuse yourself, let hope in, baby. Play your cards, be who you are.